I can't wait till he gets up. Oh, no. I don't want to get up. But you gotta get up. Who else is gonna answer all the kids? I don't want to get up. I'm too tired to make movies. But Jay, you gotta get up. We have a responsibility. If you want the video so bad, why don't you do it? Really? Woohoo! Our next question comes to us from Isabella in Rainier, Washington. Hi, Isabella.
Hi, Mr. J. My question is, how are caves formed?
Hey, Isabella, thanks for reaching out. So how are caves formed? Before we get going on that, this reminds me of my favorite movie growing up when I was your age, and that was a movie called The Goonies. Now, The Goonies was based on a group of friends whose parents apparently were deadbeats and didn't know how to pay their bills, and so the kids actually had to save their parents and find some money. And the way they did that in order to pay off their parents' houses was they went on a treasure hunt. And in the course of this treasure hunt to find pirates' treasure, they went down below their city and they explored these different caves that we're getting ready to talk about. And it was so cool because inside of these caves they had this pirate ship and they had all this gold, and it was a really cool movie because it just showed a lot of fun geography and geology related terms, and then it was also just really cool because it was a lot of fun. Okay, so the different types of caves. The first is a sea cave. A sea cave you'll find on the oceans, near coastlines, specifically near cliffs. And these get formed because waves will just constantly beat against the side of the coasts and the cliffs, and it'll pull these rocks off, and eventually caves will get formed as the tides get higher and lower and they pull these rocks out. The second kind of cave you'll see is around volcanic environments. And so what you'll see here is lava actually flowing from these different volcanoes, and then when the lava disappears or it recedes, you'll actually see these tubes that are left behind, and then you'll see caves get formed in there. Alright, so the last type of caves are the caves that you and I think of most often, and these are the ones that get formed by rocks actually being dissolved by rainwater, believe it or not. So rainwater, as it's up in the sky, will combine with naturally occurring carbon dioxide and form a carbonic acid. So it's a very, very weak acid, and this acid will fall down in rain and actually get down into the cracks and joints of these rocks and move into the surface of the earth. Now, over tens of thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of years, these rocks will dissolve because of this carbonic acid, and as more rainwater comes in constantly in many, many different rainfalls, it will wash out those dissolved rock layers. And so what starts off as very small little holes will get bigger and bigger and bigger as more rain brings in more carbonic acid. So the answer is to how are these particular caves formed? The answer is rainwater with naturally occurring carbonic acid gets into the surface of the earth, causing the rocks to dissolve. And as these rocks dissolve, they form these really big caves, water comes through it, and that's kind of how we see these caves being formed. Now that we understand a little bit how these caves were formed, let's go and take a look at some of the pictures, some of the biggest and some of the coolest caves around the world. Oh man, those are some awesome caves. You know, I got so excited about caves, I reached out to a local expert, your dad, and he told me that right nearby there was a cave called the Falkensteiner Höhle in the town of Grabenstetten, about an hour outside of here. So I gave him a ring, and he and I are gonna go check this out. Come on, let's go.
Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight, better off, I'm gonna find my way tonight, I wanna heal your sorrows, we'll make a new tomorrow, one night to...
Alright, we're almost to the opening of the Falkensteiner Höhle. Höhle is German for cave. Alright, Isabella, look at the size of this thing. It's massive. Let's go check it out. Okay, Isabel, like we talked about earlier, when it comes to caves, the most important part to remember are these joints. That's where the water comes in and dissolves the rocks. And when you actually look through, you can actually see those straight lines of where the water came in and dissolved. That's what created this cave right here. And if you look down here, you'll actually see this is where the water ultimately flowed out of the cave and removed all those rocks. Isn't this really cool? Okay, Isabel, that's about all I got on caves. Thanks for the question. Keep them coming. Oh man, this is so much fun. Next up is Forrest from Stuttgart, Germany.
Hi, Mr. J. I've been watching your show on YouTube and I really like it. And I have a question for you. What is your favorite country?
Hey Forrest, thanks for reaching out. Okay, man, so what is my favorite country? That's a tough one. Asking a geographer what his favorite country is a lot like asking me personally what my favorite Harry Potter is, which is pretty much impossible to do. It's the Prisoner of Azkaban. But since you've asked me, I'll go ahead and give it a stab. So I pretty much traveled all over the world, from Korea all around the United States to Mexico, over into Europe, parts of North Africa, and I'll say that my favorite country that I've been to date has been in Morocco. So Morocco is a country located in North Africa. It's right next to the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. So my wife and I visited Marrakesh about a year ago, and when we landed, it was really fun because you go into the city, and the city is packed. And the old city in the center is around this big walled city, and they have these things called the souks. And when you're walking around the souks are basically marketplaces. So these very narrow streets where you'll walk through, and there's people just everywhere. So you're kind of like walking like this, and you're bumping into everybody. And to the left and to the right of you on both sides are these merchants that are selling all sorts of different things. Like they're selling spices, and they're selling leather handbags that are handmade, and they sell scarves and jewelry and all sorts of really cool stuff that I'd never seen before. And you end up going through these little streets called the souks, and all along you're actually going to see these motorcycles, and these motorcycles will come flying by you, and you'll hear beep beep beep, boom, and they fly right by, and you're dodging them, and it's so much fun because it's just a really cool vibe to the city. And right smack dab in the middle of the city is something called the Jamal Al-Thana Marketplace. Now in the Jamal Al-Thana, which is the center of the town, it's this big, huge, open area where basically the whole city comes to meet, and they sell a lot of different things, and it looks like an Indiana Jones movie if you've seen the Indiana Jones. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but have you seen like the snake charmers, the guys that'll play like the flutes, and the snakes, the cobras will stand up and kind of look at you like that? You'll see that here. Another thing that I really enjoyed about Marrakesh was the food. The food is so good. It's this yummy chicken, and there's these different dishes that have lemons and all sorts of spices. And they come in these things called tagines, which are these little clay pots. They're generally orange. And if you look at them, that's where you can actually, you'll open it up, and that's where the chicken and all of the different vegetables is. It was so delicious. So after we visited Marrakesh, we actually drove out to go see the Sahara Desert. And along the way, they have this road that's called the Road of 1,000 Casbahs. And it's the most, really one of the more prettier places I've ever been through, because they have these Casbahs, which are walled cities, and they date back to hundreds and sometimes thousands of years ago. And a lot of them don't have any people living in them, but some of them do. A good example is a place that's called the Ben al-Hadou Casbah. You'll see this Casbah in a lot of really cool movies. And one of the neat things that I saw as I went through was I saw this guy that was actually making bricks by hand. So he was forming the bricks like this, and he was slamming on the ground, and he was having them dry out in the sun. And it's so cool to see things that have been happening for hundreds of years. And probably my favorite part of the entire trip was when we finally got to the Sahara Desert. Now the Sahara Desert is one of the biggest deserts in the entire world. And so when you get up onto this thing, on the Sahara, it was fun because they had this row of camels, right? And so we got out of the car, and we actually ended up jumping on these camels, which was a lot of fun because the camels would lift you up, and you'd kind of go back and forth, and then they would actually take you through the desert. And it was fun because there's these big sand dunes, and they're almost like waves you would see in the ocean, but they were all made of sand. And we got to the top of one of these really big dunes. You could look out, and you could just see hundreds and hundreds of sand dunes off in the distance, and it just looked like they went on forever. And so we ended up staying at the top of this dune until sunset. So right when the sun starts to hit the the horizon, it turns the sky into this bright red and purple and orange scene, and it was just so cool. I've never seen anything like it. And we ended up jumping back on the camels and going back down through, and we ended up sleeping in a Moroccan camp under the stars, and it was so pretty and so cool. And we ended the night by sitting around a fire, and the people that were running the camp, they would sing traditional Moroccan songs, and we learned Berber music, and it was just really, really cool experience. So that's definitely my favorite place that I've ever been to. And why is this my favorite country, and why do I love being a geographer? Morocco was my favorite place because I got to experience things that I had never seen before, and I got to be a part of a culture that I had never even heard of. What I would encourage you to do, and everybody here to do, is to learn more and to be curious about the world around you, because you just get more and more cultured and you just learn more. And to me, that's just probably the best part of all this. So that was a great question for us, and if you got anything like that, keep it coming.
I wish Mr. G would talk about mice more often. Hey, Alice from El Paso, Texas, what do you have?
Hi, Mr. J. My name is Alice. How hot is it in the desert?
Hey Alice, thanks for reaching out. Okay, so how hot does it get in a desert? Now first, if you remember back to episode 2, when we talked about deserts. So deserts are actually classified that way because of their lack of precipitation and not necessarily their temperature. So you can actually have really, really cold deserts. A good example of that is the Antarctic desert. All of Antarctica is actually a desert because it receives very little precipitation. Another good example of that is in western China, the Gobi Desert. Now the Gobi Desert is one of the coldest deserts in the world, but it also sees extreme temperatures as well. So in the summer you'll see upwards to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And in the winter, you'll see negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is almost 4 to 5 times as cold as your refrigerator and your freezer. Can you believe that? So back to your question of how hot does the desert get, or how hot can it get? We'll go ahead and talk about the desert where you're at. So you can see today I've got my El Paso t-shirt on. I'm repping El Paso as well. So you're located in El Paso there in the Chihuahuan Desert. Now the Chihuahuan Desert runs in the United States from Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. And then down in Mexico, it goes to northern New Mexico as well. So that general region, it's a very large desert in North America. In the summer, to answer your question, how hot does it get there? It can actually reach up to 115 degrees, which in truth would be great weather to go for a swim. So go ahead and bother your mom and take you to the pool, because it sounds like a blast. Okay, that's all I got on deserts, and thanks for your question. Keep them coming.
Boy, Mr. J likes geography. Next up is Caleb from Stuttgart, Germany. Hi, Caleb.
Hello, Mr. J. Have you ever found an abandoned village or a sunken ship?
Oh man, hey Caleb, thanks. What a great question. Yet again, I look like I found another explorer, another adventure on my hand. So, have I ever come across an abandoned village or a sunken ship? Well, actually, funny story. So when I was in Ireland about 10 years ago with my wife, we were driving all the way across the country from the west side all the way to the east side of the country. And as we were driving, we looked off in the distance and we saw a castle. And so we were really excited because here in Ireland, you got to see these castles. So we drove over as fast as we could to go there. And the craziest part about it is there were no tourists there. There were no lines, there were no gates, there were no nothing. It was just a fence, and out in the middle of this farm was this castle that was completely broken down, and it was crazy. So we just walked right up into it. And as you can see from some of these pictures, you could just almost imagine from hundreds of years ago this castle that used to be filled with knights and people going on quests. And these big fireplaces and these rooms, all these things that you see in these movies, but what's right in front of you now is this broken down building with just covered with moss and grass. And what I found out about it when I did research later is this thing was called the Ballycarberry Castle. And there were buildings on this site all the way back to the mid-1300s. And then around 1600, the castle was actually lost in a fight, in a massive war. And so I'm thinking to myself, this is all this history. And it was so cool that my wife and I got to experience this all by ourselves. Now here's the thing. Was I the first one to discover it? No, probably not. right? This is a site that I'd seen many times, but for me, it was a discovery. My wife and I had never seen it before. So what I would remind you when you wonder and you think to yourself, have I discovered anything? Remember that the most important discovery that you can have is inside of your mind and for yourself. So if you are the one that discovers it for you for the first time, then you've made a massive discovery. Now, if it doesn't do it for you and you've got to discover something first, remember, there are many places that we have not seen, the whole world, and I encourage you to go and explore those things. Those are in science and mathematics and in medicine. And you know what? There's space too. We talked about that earlier. There's so much to do up in space that we haven't discovered. So stay curious and never let anybody tell you that you can never do something, because you can always do something if you put your mind to it. All right, Caleb, thanks for the question. Stay curious, man.
Okay, that's all the time we got for this week's Geography with Jay. If you sent in a question and I haven't answered it yet, don't worry. I still have your question. I'm just a little behind. But don't worry, I'm getting caught back up. So if you want to send me a question, go ahead and have your parents send them my way to my email, and I'd be glad to help you guys out. This is so much fun. Now, as always, stay curious. Talk to you later. Bye.
Showing up, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Wait